So since entering the race for Scioto County Commissioner, I've had a number of people ask me why in the world I would choose to run as a Democrat in a county that is majority Republican. It's a good question. I think it's fair. It deserves an answer. So I'm going to try to give that here. I'll start, though, by saying that personally I'm more of an independent than anything else, always have been. Over the years I've voted for Republicans, for Democrats, for Libertarians, for Green Party candidates, for independents of various sorts. Because when I vote for the person and not the party. If I had a magic wand and I could, I'd abolish the whole two-party system tonight, right now. I believe it's a scourge on our democracy for all the same reasons that many of our founding fathers did and warned against it. But as I consulted with various people prior to throwing my hat in the ring, a clear consensus emerged. Nearly everyone I talked to agreed that given the state of both our national and local political scene, that if I wanted to have a legitimate shot at this thing, to really be effective, I would need to pick at least one of the two major parties for support. As much as I hated to hear that, I relented and I chose the Democratic Party. Why? Two reasons primarily, and they're really simple reasons. First is that despite my own misgivings with many of our national elected officials, and I have them, believe me, I still tend to resonate with the old school values of the Democratic Party. On paper at least, we still claim to represent the day-to-day interests and concerns of working people. And I think that this is a good thing and worth holding on to. Second reason is that I love a good challenge. It's just in my blood. It's something about who I am. If you tell me I can't do something or that such and such is impossible, all you've done is convince me all the more to go after it. What greater challenge could there be in this particular election, in this particular county, at this particular time, than to run as a Democrat on a platform that centers the needs of our most vulnerable citizenry? You call me crazy, but I think it's hard to resist a good underdog story, so I figured, why not try to write one through this campaign? To my first point, though, I'd like to wind up these thoughts by sharing a short history lesson with you. Once upon a time, America's industrial working class held center stage in American politics. Did you know, for instance, that in every presidential election from 1948 to 1964, that Democratic candidates launched their campaigns with a Labor Day rally in Detroit's Cadillac Square? It's true. Now, this was back during America's industrial golden years. And although that time was no utopia, especially for minority groups and for non-unionized workers, there's many of our senior citizens who remember the mid-20th century as a better time in America for good reason. Gone were the robber baron days of unbridled capitalism. President Roosevelt's New Deal had ushered in an era of social and political reform that saw an unprecedented centering of the interests of working people on the national political stage. With the passing of the National Labor Relations Act, labor unions across the country began to organize, federate, and build political power with the support of the federal government. As a result of their efforts, which were also fueled by the post-World War II industrial boom, America's GDP grew a whopping 37% in the 15 years following the war. Now, unlike GDP growth in more recent decades, though, those years saw an extraordinary increase in the standard of living for everyday run-of-the-mill citizens like you and me. In fact, between 1947 and 1979, incomes grew fastest among workers at the bottom of the wage scale rather than the top. Can you imagine that? But then came the Powell Memo and Reaganomics and the rise of neoliberalism. Organized labor began to decline and lose power as the American economy shifted away from its manufacturing base. And now, 40-some odd years later, the American economy is driven primarily by healthcare and retail services, which is a trend we see reflected here locally in Scioto County. Now, the Office of Commissioner is mostly concerned with matters of economic development. And for the last 8 years, at least, our local office has been held by individuals who believe deeply in the neoliberal agenda that is responsible for so much of labor's decline in our country. And I believe, personally, that Scioto County is due for a commissioner board that represents a better balance of conservative and progressive ideals and concerns, where the needs of the working class are prized just as much as the financial interests of businesses and corporations. And that's why I chose to run as a Democrat. with a pro-worker voice. And that's why I hope you will choose to support me in the election this November.